sequence of similar threat assessment or situational reports. Mr. Clerk, could you call up SSM NSC CAN 7064? Now, just have a look at that, Mr. Ozovsky, and perhaps as the clerk scrolls down, you'll be able to just tell us, roughly speaking, this is a very similar looking report, although different in some respects. Can you describe what type of report this is?
So this would have just been something that was set to a very long email list that shows what has transpired and whatever the current situational status is of the various ports of entry.
Okay. And again, scrolling down just so Mr. Ozovsky can see the report as it progresses through, but stopping there, please, Mr. Clerk. Again, we have a BLUF, a bottom line up front description under the same type of heading, intelligence landscape. And again, for this report, it says that at 8:30 in the morning on February 14th, and I'll quote, the overall threat to CBSA officers and infrastructure remains low. And do you see that, Mr. Ozovsky?
I do.
And can you agree with me again, so that we don't have to go through them all, and perhaps subject to check if you do want to, that had been the report given in all of these reports throughout February?
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Clerk, if you could next call up SSM CAN 406200. And I think we'll see that as you described it earlier, a wide distribution email with similar situational information. And if you could just scroll through it, Mr. Clerk, we're looking for page 4, bottom of page 4. Again, tables and statistics about activity at the various border points, and then we get the intelligence landscape BLUF. And I'm sorry, you know what I forgot to do was to get the date and time of this. Mr. Clerk, could you go up to the top, please? Thanks. So we are now the next day. So this is February 15th. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I just wanted to make sure we understood this. So this is the next day's report of the same type. And when we look at the intelligence landscape bottom line up front, we see the same word about, same words about the threat being low, but there's some more words. But caution should be exercised in light of recent reporting surrounding IMVE groups. And do you know why that appeared on February 15th, the day after the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
Not specifically, no, but I can say in general, when events like this happen, one of the things that as a national security, part of the national security apparatus is that you're always concerned that that might tilt somebody from just being an online sort of person thinking about this type of thing that actually moves to action and does something. And that actually happened later on after this on February 17th. I can describe an event where something like that potentially happened.
And you see that below the sentence we were just talking about, IMVE groups, we have a repeat of the observation that the protests at POEs have caused significant operational impact that may result in a threat to Canada's economic security and prosperity. The one we saw last time in the other report, correct?
I see that, yes.
Now your explanation,
had full authority to manage international crossings. And Mr. Keenan responds that this purposefully confuses authorities between governments. Do you recall that?
I'm reading it as you're telling me this, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Keenan refers to the federal authorities under the Customs Act and the International Bridges and Tunnels Act, but concludes that these acts don't directly bring any authorities to bear on the blockade, right?
That's what it appears to be, yeah.
Okay, and do you agree with Michael Keenan's email?
I do.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Osovsky, you understand that Windsor and other municipalities were challenged in terms of their capacity to respond to these protests, in terms of the availability of local policing and other resources, such as, in Windsor's case, Jersey barriers.
I do.
Would you agree that bolstering local capacity and resources is necessary to mitigate the risk of major impacts on the operation of the federal border crossings in the future?
I think that would apply to many ports of entry that saw disruptions like this based on their unique geography and or access routes to and from the ports of entry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Would you agree that the blockades revealed a mismatch between jurisdictional authorities and responsibilities?
I think we saw that across the entire country, and I think that, you know, from my perspective of trying to run the border in a nationally consistent manner and seeing the variations in response across the country, either how law enforcement chose to respond to it or what the particular infrastructure was problematic for us.
Okay. Mr. Commissioner, I know I'm at the end of my
roads, in some cases gravel roads. Were those a viable option for commercial traffic looking to cross the border?
Not always, because there were load limits. So an example that pops to mind is at Coots, there was a side road that the BSOs were able to use to drive to and from the port of entry while it was functioning, but that would not have been appropriate for a large commercial vehicle to go on.
Let's go to ssm.nsc.can 6050. This is the CBSA SITREP as of February 12th. So that's the Saturday of the third weekend, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And if we just scroll down, we see reports of activity at Cornwall. Mr. Osovsky, I understand that the port of entry at Cornwall is particularly complex jurisdictionally. Is that correct? Blue Water, Emerson, Coots, Pacific Highway. And then there's a table there of upcoming protest events that are ongoing, confirmed, and unconfirmed.
Yes.
Mr. Osovsky, does that...
Questions for you on behalf of Commission Counsel. First, I would ask you to cast your minds back to August 30th of this year when you were interviewed by my colleagues in company with some of your colleagues. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is confirm to some extent what you can confirm and to some extent what you can confirm on behalf of your colleagues. And in particular, have you reviewed the summary of that interview that was prepared by Commission Counsel?
Yes, I have.
And you, Mr. D?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. And to the extent that that summary captures information that you two provided to Commission Counsel, can you confirm that it's accurate and that you adopt it as your evidence before the Commission?
Yes and yes. Yes as well.
Thank you. And to the extent the information is that of your colleagues at the interview, can you confirm that it was reviewed by them for accuracy and believed to be accurate?
Yes and yes.
Thank you. And also, Transport Canada filed an institutional report with the Commission. Can you confirm that that document is accurate and that it forms part of the evidence that Transport Canada has submitted to the Commission?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now, let me ask you each gentleman to introduce yourselves and describe the role you have in Transport Canada.
My name is Michael Keenan. I'm the Deputy Minister of Transport Canada, so I'm responsible for overseeing all aspects of the operations of Transport Canada, and I'm the head of the transport portfolio, which includes 8 Crown corporations, 4 agencies, and 50 shared governance organizations, and I am responsible for providing advice to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you. And Mr. Diak, can you give us an outline of your position and what you do there?
Yes. My name is Christian D. I'm the Chief Economist and the DG, the Director General of the Transportation Economic Analysis Unit at Transport Canada. My role and the role of my group at Transport Canada is to monitor the performance of the transportation system and to conduct economic assessment on any disruption affecting the transportation system. And in doing so, I'm providing the advice and the result of the analysis to the senior management, including the deputy and the minister.
Thank you. And if I can go back to you, Mr. Keenan, and ask you to describe, it would probably take you all day if you were comprehensive, but just describe what Transport Canada does, what is jurisdiction, what is the federal jurisdiction that Transport Canada administers?
So Transport Canada is responsible for all aspects of the Canadian transportation system that is within federal jurisdiction. And we have 3 key priorities that we pursue across the organization of 6,400 people. The first is to ensure the safety and security of the part of the national transportation system that's in federal jurisdiction, ensure the environmental safety, environmental and green performance, and to ensure the system is efficient both for moving people and goods, and so that there's a strong trade and transportation network. In terms of jurisdiction, it varies by mode. So in aviation, it's essentially
000840. So, Mr. Day, I think you've been alluding to this document. This is a document that I understand your directorate prepared. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we have a key messages box here that summarizes the analysis. Could you walk the commissioner through some of the key messages?
Yes. Again, the first key messages was basically to highlight the trade that was affected at the Ambassador Bridge. Again, using Statistics Canada data that was available there. And we were in a position to highlight that about 390 million of trade daily were affected, which again represent 26% of the export of the country to the US. And
good afternoon. My name is Brendan Miller, and I'm counsel to Freedom Corp, which represents the protesters that were in Ottawa in January and February of 2022. So I just want to begin first by bringing up an email, and it's government document ssm.can.00004353_rel.0001. And if we could scroll down to the last page, it's in reverse order, okay? And up, I apologize, up to the beginning where the email starts. Okay, so this is an email from Ron Renas. Are you familiar that he's the GM of the Peace Bridge? He's the general manager of the Peace Bridge.
yes.
Okay. And then the other individual who the email is sent to is Vance Badway, and I take it you understand that that's Vance Badway is the Member of Parliament for Niagara Centre?
Yes.
And are you familiar with Tim Clutterbuck? He, I understand, is the recently retired president of ASW Steel. Are you familiar with him?
I don't think I know this person.
Okay. So I want to go through this email with you briefly. And in it is some information about not the blockades, but as of January 27th, the GM of the Peace Bridge advises the yesterday border delays were 70 to 75 minutes entering Canada, and trucks were queued across the Peace Bridge and miles up the I-190 in Buffalo. Truck processing times at Canada Customs have increased from 2 minutes to 3 minutes per truck. While some truckers are leaving the industry because of the vaccination requirements, what is not being talked about is drivers quitting because of border delays that impinge on their hours of service requirements, onerous ArriveCAN, and PHAC requirements in tech. If they are not quitting the industry, they are getting out of long-haul cross-border business and switching to only domestic routes. And the U.S. Bureau of Labor reports just released states that the long-haul trucking transportation costs in the U.S. have increased 25%. Do you agree with that statement as of January 22nd, 2022?
Which statement?
The one I just read to you.
Sorry, there's 6 statements here. Which one are you referring to?
Well, we can go through each one if you want. Which one, actually, I'll do it this way. Which of these each statements don't you agree with?
I have a hard time agreeing or disagreeing simply because there's a few stats on a very specific moment and a very specific crossing on a very specific day. So I don't track that in my head, so I couldn't agree or disagree with it.
Okay, but you have no reason to say that this email is not correct.
When you say the email, this is an email I've never seen, and I've only read a quarter of it, so I have a hard time coming up with a proper judgment of this email.
Okay, so you haven't seen this email before? Today?
No,
Okay.
but it's to a number of people, like I'm not on the chain, right?
Okay. And it states there under the link, if we can scroll down, it says, steps need to be taken immediately to reduce the processing time to pre-pandemic levels, rethinking the necessity of asking multiple health-related questions as they are not being answered honestly anyways, and adding a field of a driver's fast card to indicate vaccination status are a couple of suggestions. Was that addition to a fast card, was it ever implemented?
So this would be a question that you would need to put to CBSA because it has to do with the details of the operations of a border point, which is their responsibility.
Okay. And if we can scroll down where it discusses ArriveCAN, and we'll just hop right to the points there, beginning as traffic returns. So there, the GM in the Peace Bridge says, as traffic returns to normal, the longer processing times associated with ArriveCAN and travelers not filing or not filling or improperly filling will result in border gridlock. Did that happen?
The characterization of border gridlock at this time is not consistent with my memory or our analysis of the transportation trends.
Okay. And it says there too, ArriveCAN is not a binational program like Nexus and FAST and is unknown to the U.S., meaning many American visitors will arrive at the border unprepared. Is that true?
I think it is certainly true that ArriveCAN is not a binational program. It's a national program. It's a tool of CBSA, so it's a national program. And in fact, actually, ArriveCAN is not a program. ArriveCAN is a border facilitation tool.
What about the statement there that they state that these mandates essentially will adversely impact travelers, particularly the elderly who do not have smartphones? Would you agree with that?
Sorry,
Sorry, I might have skipped
Can you
one.
just point out, because I'm
Oh, yeah, so will
you have to
adversely,
give me a break because this is a document I've never seen before.
right, okay.
So which point?
So where it says will adversely impact travelers, particularly the elderly who do not have smartphones.
And that point relates to what?
The essentially vaccine mandates and as I understand it from reading it, the essentially administrative process now put in place by the federal government in trying to cross the border.
My general impression of vaccine mandates is vaccinations protect the elderly.
Right, but would you agree that it adversely impacted travelers, particularly the elderly, who do not have smartphones? Can you agree with that statement?
I can't agree or disagree because I don't really get the context in which it's sort of asserted.
Okay. Would you agree that the experience with the border from the general manager, as he states, is that requirements that impose additional steps, more documentation, providing more information create border delays, and as a result, border avoidance, so avoiding going across the border? Can you agree with that?
Well, I would agree they're his statements, but there's some generalities here that I have a hard time sort of agreeing with or disagreeing with because of the context is unclear to me.
Okay, and so if we can scroll up then to page number, the one directly before the email, because he's in reverse. Okay, and so in this email, I take it you know who these folks are. It's Mr. Badaway forwards the email to the following people, and that's to Minister Mendocino, the Minister of Public Safety. You know who he is?
Yes, I do.
And he also forwards it to Minister Algarra, the Minister of Transport.
I know Minister Algarra well.
Right, and he's the minister that you report to.
Yes.
Right. And he didn't pass this on to you?
To my memory and knowledge, he did not pass this on to me.
Right, but you know, as the Deputy Minister of Transport, as the highest, essentially, civil servant within that ministry, isn't this sort of information something important that you should know?
I think you have to understand the context. Transport Canada, the Minister of Transport gets a massive amount of correspondence. I get a massive amount of correspondence on something like this, on an exchange between an MP and the minister. I may or may not see it depending upon the nature and the context. So it's neither surprising nor it wouldn't be surprising for me to get it, and it wouldn't be surprising for me not to get it. And this one, I do not recall this being forwarded to me.
Okay. Can you agree that having this forwarded to you would have been of assistance in carrying out your duties as the Minister of Transport?
No.
All right. So in your evidence earlier today, you talked about the economic impact of the protests at the border. Is that right?
Not of the protests at the border, of the blockage of the transportation of commercial goods.
Right. And all of that evidence, can you agree with me that most of it was hypothetical and that you haven't done an ex post facto analysis?
It wasn't hypothetical because the blockade was an actual thing.
Well, I understand that, but
And the concerns, the impact was an actual impact. And the stress and the adverse sort of impact on assessing Canada as a place to invest in sort of auto production was an actual impact. So they were actual impacts, not hypothetical ones.
right. But you can agree that those things I just showed you from the GM of the Peace Bridge, those would also impact the issue with respect to being able to get across the border in a timely manner. People were quitting trucking because of delays. So that's an adverse impact, is it not?
The issues that list of issues you raised were ones that we were monitoring closely with our colleagues at CBSA and other departments. And in fact, we were tracking over the course of, we were tracking over the course of January the trends in truck traffic across the border.
Okay.
Things like sort of congestion and gridlock. I don't think we,
Right.
until the border blockades caused by the Freedom Convoy, I don't think we were observing gridlock.
Right.
What we did see was actually that the trucks were flowing at about the rate you would expect given this time of year.
Okay.
So we
can I-
analyzed it.
I understand.
And our conclusion was
I
different
thank you
from
for
the
your,
one.
I thank you for your answer. But
suggesting.
you're familiar with the government agency Statistics Canada or Stats Canada, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and StatsCan is the National Statistical Office. It's the agency that ensures Canadians have key information with respect to the economy. You understand that?
Yes.
And StatsCan comes under the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Industry. You're aware?
Yes.
And it's accountable to Parliament through that minister, who's currently Minister Champagne. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I could please bring up POE.HRF 0000009. So this document is a report done by StatsCan on Canadian international trade, merchandise trade, February 2020. And the key point that I want to take you to is, I've highlighted it. If we could roll down, please, to, I think it's page 4. Oh, my apologies. I will just get the right page for you. It is on PDF page 8. My apologies. Okay, and so there they did a summary of their findings, and it says blockades at border crossings, and I'll just read that to you, and then I'll put the question to you. So in late January and February.
Folks, if you want to be kept up to date on what's happening at the Emergency Act inquiry, including my live tweets and some clips and highlights that occurring at the Emergency Act inquiry, by heading over to revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. That's revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. And of course, here, folks, while you're there, please head over to donorbox.org/Emergency Act Commission. That's donorbox.org/Emergency Act Commission. And of course, here, folks, if you could chip in a buck or two, that will be greatly appreciated, as it will help me cover my travel expenses, including my expenses on food, as bringing you these stories doesn't come for free. Thank you so much.